Casual Birder podcast, a weekly podcast for people interested in wild birds. I'm Susie Buttress. As a casual birder, I try to find time to watch birds as I go about my daily tasks. Join me each week to hear about the birds I've seen, interviews with others, and stories from listeners around the world. This week, I take a walk around the London Wetland Centre in Barnes with my guest, conductor, author and birdwatcher Lev Parikian. Managed by the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust, the London Wetland Centre is described as an urban oasis for wildlife and people. It includes a visitor centre, a cafe, 6 hides, and a surprising expanse of lakes, pools and gardens. It was created on the site of 4 redundant reservoirs and has attracted a large number of bird species throughout the year, as well as insects and reptiles. My guest, Lev, is an orchestral conductor who has enjoyed watching birds since he was a child. In 2016, he journeyed throughout the UK to see the 200 birds that he had listed as a youngster. And he wrote about his quest in his recently published book, Why Do Birds Suddenly Disappear? We had a great morning wandering the reserve with beautiful autumn sunshine. One of the highlights for me was hearing more about the Chetty's warbler, when one decided it wanted to feature on the show. So Lev, thank you so much for joining me out at the London Wetland Centre here. As you can tell, we're obviously in London with the parakeets around. Look at these. Good morning.
Very, very tame geese. So these are red-breasted geese, and of course these are part of the Barnes, the WWT's wildfowl collection, which they have close to the visitor centre, and which are more or less tame birds. They'll have their wings clipped and they're fed every day by the keepers, but they're a great introduction to any young people who come around the place.
Absolutely,
they're so colourful, and we've got barnacle geese as well, and then the other ones with the white heads, which I don't actually know what they are because they're not. Oh, hello! A bit of a fracas between the red-breasted goose and the other white one. We can look on the boards what they are, because that one's not a native bird. Red-breasted goose normally in the wild would be a very rare visitor to Britain. Barnacle geese, the other ones with the black and white plumage, rather more common. They come over here in great numbers, but not usually the centre of London. So the red-breasted geese are quite extraordinarily because they look almost like an anatomical drawing. They're mostly black with some white parts, but they have this red patches on their cheeks and especially on their front, on their breasts, which are delineated with sort of white outlines. So they look quite an extraordinary appearance. And they're I think they're settling down now a bit after their little fracas. One of them got a bit chased. And in between all of these very tame geese are some equally tame moorhens, which I'm presuming are actually wild birds, but they're just so comfortable. They're a very common park bird anyway. So they're just so comfortable amongst humans that they'll just be rootling around in the gravel and on the water's edge for anything they can find.
Fantastic. I shall look forward to coming back and looking at those again later.
Here we are. Sorry, we got one of these posts that give you information about it. There's emperor geese. So they are all, emperor goose, Chenkanagika. And they live on the coast and feed on marine plants like sea lettuce and shellfish. And
very pretty birds, aren't they, with the white head and sort of black and white markings.
Yeah, sort of very. Can't think of the word scalloped feathers. That's the one.
Yeah.
Yes, terribly hesitant sometimes about describing birds and how to describe the plumages and specific words.
I'll just go with what comes to me. But
it's gorgeous.
The word doesn't exactly.
It's gorgeous. I love it.
That's usually what comes out.
I think that this area of the reserve is very much geared towards the educational thing. It's almost a sort of quasi-zoo-like atmosphere here, where you have the signposts and the information, and the birds in this area aren't really going to go anywhere because they're on display. But they are also part of a conservation effort, and that was one of the reasons that the WWT was founded back in the day by Peter Scott, which was his interest in especially wildfowl conservation, and they continue the very good work to this day. And what I find amazing about this place and all the WWT reserves around the country is that mixture of the tame-ish near the cafe and the visitor centre, and then you strike out further and you'll see really something extraordinarily wild for the centre of London. We're half an hour from the very centre of London here, and it's really quite amazing to see something that is so wild, if that's the right word, in the middle of a city.
I think obviously as children, being able to approach birds quite closely, it can really gain your attention. I think
it really
taking
can.
a child out just into the woods where you might hear something, it's quite hard to get them engaged.
It can feel a little bit remote, can't it? And especially if something's just flying away, just as you say, oh, look at that, and it goes off and scurries in. So it can be a little bit frustrating. So I think, especially with young children, it can really be a very good introduction to the world, and then they can be prepared for a life of disappointment, sitting in freezing cold hides, looking at very remote and unidentifiable wading birds.
Yeah, describes many of my hide experiences, I have to say. We couldn't have picked a better day. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's early October and there's hardly a cloud in the sky. Blue sky, the leaves are just starting to change on the trees, so we're just starting to get that patchwork effect. But I don't know, there's a chill in the air, but the sun is really warm, so looking forward to a really lovely day of looking at birds.
With any luck.
So there's black-headed gull flying over, and please do correct me if I get anything wrong.
That was definitely a black-headed gull, mercifully silent.
Yes.
They can make quite the racket once they put their minds to it, can't they?
So, Lev, can you tell me a little bit about how you got into birding?
Well, it was a tale in three parts, really. When I was a child, probably starting at about the age of 7, I grew up in Oxfordshire, and we had a great big book which had, I think, just been published, the Reader's Digest Book of British Birds, a very handsome, largish coffee table type volume with a tawny owl on the front, and really fantastic illustrations, which I think were what I found the most arresting at the time, by a chap called Raymond Harris, or Raymond Harris Ching, can't remember which way around. And these, I think birders would look at them nowadays and go, they're not entirely realistic. He really worked himself into the dust to do these illustrations. I think he did them all in a year or even less. But they're very striking. Most of them are not taken from live samples. These things would be sent to him in the post, and he'd sketch them and draw them up. And I think I grew addicted to looking at that book. My copy of it is certainly very, very well worn. And then I would go out into the garden and around the village, and there's a river near where we lived, and I'd be looking at the birds, and I got hooked and asked for a pair of binoculars, and wanted to go on trips to various places, and wherever we went on holiday I'd have my trusty binoculars and be pretending to see loads of things and make these lists. And then as these things happen sometimes, I think when I reached teenagerhood, the interest rather faded away, and I became interested in other things, and so it continued for the next 30 odd years. It's not that I was completely blind to birds, and I would notice the occasional thing, and but I certainly wouldn't have gone out actively to look for them, and I wouldn't have gone, okay, I'll go to the nearest park or the nearest wood or the nearest salt marsh or whatever to say, I've got to go birding. And then as middle age, I suppose, took its hold in my late 40s, I found myself gradually drawn to it and even more strongly attracted to it around the age of 50. And so I decided I'd set out in 2016 to see if I could see 200 species in a year, and I wrote a book about it. And really since just before then, it's been quite an obsession of mine again. After 35 years off.
Oh, well, fantastic. I look forward to hearing all about your experiences as we go around.
So yes, it was interesting because I think when I was a kid, I was a very good book birder, if you see what I mean. I loved looking at the books, and I loved going out and seeing the birds as well. But I think a lot of whatever residual knowledge I had was from the books rather than with the hands-on experience. Obviously, as a child, I didn't have. I couldn't just drive myself places. I was reliant on mostly my mum to take some time off and take me out to places. So there was a limited amount that I could do in terms of going far and wide.
Were your parents at all into bird watching?
No, I don't think so. I think they took an interest in nature, having moved from London to the countryside when I was on the way. They obviously took an interest. My father was very interested in trees, and my mum was a keen gardener, and living in a village in the 60s and 70s, I think might have been a rather more wildlife-filled experience than it is nowadays. But no, they weren't. They weren't especially over enthusiastic or enthusiastic in the way that I've become. No,
it wasn't like you had that as a role model to.
No, it wasn't. So it's interesting where it came from, and then where it went to, and then why it came up again. I don't know.
So do you have any favoured type of birds or favourite birds that you see?
Oh no, I love them all equally.
Even a feral pigeon?
Even the feral pigeon. I'll be the first to point to the beautiful iridescence on the neck of a feral pigeon and say, look at that. Don't call it a rat, look at that. But I think I do have a sort of pet theory about why people don't like these things like pigeons, parakeets as well. It's just simply because they're successful, and we're supposed to be the successful ones. And I think subliminally we think they're a threat in some way. We think they're dirty and horrible, and they impinge on our lives, possibly in what we think are unpleasant ways. The same with the ubiquitous gulls. When people complain about the herring gull licking their chips, well, the herring gull's hungry and it's got used to seeing us as a food source, so why wouldn't it? It's just being a herring gull. And it's yes, it's especially as you were saying before we started recording, those parakeets. We probably love a few of them, colourful, a little bit noisy sometimes, but when they become mob-handed, as they tend to, very large roosts in various parts of the southeast especially, and they can disrupt our lives and the lives of other birds and other wildlife. So we think that's not keeping things in the balance. Now let's just do this. So here we are. That's a Chetty's warbler. You hear that? Chicka 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 chicka. So when I was in the book that we both have, in the index of that book, you'll find a list of rare birds, and it's quite a long list of things that have been only seen very, very rarely. And in 1969, when that book was published, the Chetty's warbler had been seen, I think, on half a dozen occasions in Britain. It's very, very rare, scarce, small brown bird. So if that sound had been heard here 50 years ago, we'd be standing among a line of about 250 probably middle-aged men with telescopes looking earnestly for it. And in the intervening time, it started breeding, I think, in the 70s, and has spread so that now if I come to a place like this, or RSPB sites, any kind of water-based site, then and I don't hear one, then I'll be slightly going, why are there no Chetty's warblers?
That's fascinating. I've only recently heard Chetty's warblers, and I'm still not absolutely sure that I would definitely be able to say that was a Chetty's warbler.
Nearly always, in my experience, you'll hear that first chip, and then there'll be a small gap, and then it gets more gabbly as it goes along, but it's quite loud and explosive. That bird is 20 metres away on the other side somewhere, I should think. But the other thing about them is that they are quite elusive, so they will make that song. The habitual thing, in my experience of them, is that you'll hear that chicka chicka chap, and you'll look round and you go, okay, there it is, and you'll earnestly stare at a patch of reeds with your binoculars looking for it, and everything goes silent. And then after about 5 minutes of that, you'll hear the same song from 10 metres behind you. So you turn around, and it likes to toy with us in that way.
I'm just going to hold my recorder out and see if I can pick up some of that. So that call it's making at the moment is not the first call it was making, is it? So
it's a little bit more sort of sub-songy, I think.
Yeah.
It's not that explosive thing, so it's just chattering to itself or to somebody else. I don't know enough about whether it might be a young one learning, or whether it's it'll be a male thinking. Marking out territory, and I don't know.
It's a sunny, warm day. Maybe he's just sitting there
going,
and just
yes, it's sunny.
Trying it out. We'll carry on round and see if we can
go towards the wild side.
But it's one that I really want to start feeling like I'm getting to know. There are quite a lot of warblers around, and I'm just not very good with them.
And they're all small and brown, and they tend to skulk out of sight. That will be, especially if you come to a reserve, anywhere that's kind of water based. That will be the one you'll hear. And then again, the time to get warblers, a lot of them is in the spring and summer, when we have visitors from Africa, reed warbler, sedge warbler, and so on. Which again, especially in the spring months, they will be quite vocal when they arrive, and you'll be able to hear their scratchy songs, again usually from the depths of a reed bed.
Guessing they're mallards having a little natter to each other. I love when they get a little bit more vocal. It can sound like they're laughing, like one of them's told a
really
joke.
dirty joke, that cackle. Sid James cackle.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and these little chipping sounds you hear as well from coots and moorhens and that kind of thing. They're just announcing their presence or saying something. Who knows? We try and interpret these things. Learned people make great studies of scientific reasons why birds do what they do, and behaviours. A lot of it seems still a huge mystery.
I was going to say, and then you get people like me who anthropomorphise it all.
Oh, all the time, yeah. And another Chetti's warbler. Now, what we could do is we could stick around and see if we can not see it. We're standing between two bridges in a mid of a reed bed. We're about 20 yards from the wild side hide, which will yield great bounty when we get there. But we're just diverted by this Chetti's warbler, which gave up quite a loud song, didn't it?
It did.
Now,
Are they
that's not. Yeah, I think it is. Good vision.
There's another 3 to the right, and I don't know if they are.
I can't quite say. You see, again, brown things going in amongst brown.
No, they're not. They're not dunnocks. Those ones on the right aren't. I think the first couple might have been. They're greenish. You see, they're out on the. Yeah. There's 3 of them out on the reeds and just in the trees.
I think they're chiffchaffs.
Oh, I did wonder if they might be chiffchaffs.
Really?
I'm just trying to see if they had an eye stripe or a supercilium.
Yeah. And then actually the dunnock has just come into the left, I think, is that?
Yeah, I think on the left there were 2 dunnocks. But yeah, they're definitely a sort of soft green colour.
Meanwhile, the Chetti's warbler
has been totally silent.
Is completely scarpered. Yes. Now then, show yourself, you fiend. So I reckon that was about 5 metres away, down in there somewhere. Let's not get distracted by other things.
Okay, you look back for the Chetti's warbler.
What's so frustrating about it is that it is so close. It's really loud, and then you think you've zoned in on it, and then you put your binoculars on it, and it's just nowhere. Reed beds are frustrating things. Later in the winter, I'll come here and attempt to look for a magnificent bittern. Relative of the heron. They winter here, and if we're lucky enough to have a cold winter, then they will be out on the ice. But looking for a small brown thing in an expanse of green and brown reeds is...
That is actually amazing, isn't it? How it can throw its voice out like that and...
remain invisible.
Absolutely. And I wonder if that has the same effect on predators, that they can't pinpoint where the bird is, even though the bird is quite vocal.
Yeah. Those magnificent dragonflies flying across as well, do you see just the frustrations of bird watching. But we can content ourselves by looking at that dragonfly, which is doing it's now stopped doing its thing.
Those chiffchaffs are still...
Yeah, still fossicking around in the...
They've actually got quite brownish heads.
They have. They're quite fearless. I wonder if they're kids.
Yeah, the fact there's three of them together as well.
Yeah.
They've got beautiful soft colouring though. It's really, really delicate. What's the bird that's very like a chiffchaff? Is it a willow warbler?
It is willow warbler, yeah.
Do you know how to tell those apart?
I know how to tell those apart if they're singing. They, because the chiffchaff has chiffchaff, its song is just saying its name, chiffchaff, chiffchaff, chiffchaff. And the willow warbler has a much more expressive song, which is sort of descending, soft fluting scales. If you know the song of a chaffinch, it's similar to that, only softer.
Right.
So it has it can vary in length, but it has that kind of thing.
Oh.
And sometimes it gives a little squiggle on the end. So it's like it's disappointed, but then it suddenly finds a Jaffa cake.
Fantastic. So actually, you're a musician.
I am a conductor by trade. Yeah, that's the day job. I was a percussionist, orchestral percussionist for 15-20 years, and then I moved from the back of the orchestra to the front. This is a loud
feels like
thing.
it must have just flown.
It's got to be in there. Come on. And so yes, I've been working as a conductor for some years now.
I wondered if your musical... Gosh, it feels like he really wants us to know where he is.
He really, really doesn't know.
I wondered if your musical training made you more attuned to bird.
Yeah, you'd have thought, wouldn't you? You really would have thought it would. But certainly when I was getting back into the birding a few years ago and thought, I'm going to learn about birdsong, I did a lot of listening, and I found it really, really hard. Oh. Possibly even harder than non-musical people, I don't know. And I'm not quite sure, maybe it's just that learning anything new at a certain age becomes more difficult. Possibly because I can't define birdsong in the same way as I can define music. It's a different language, you can't notate it in the same way.
So a bird just flew down into the reed just there that I thought was one of the chiffchaffs, but then the three chiffchaffs are still...
Oh right, so I was looking in a different direction, which is typical.
But I'm not certain that that's the
the chetties.
Is there anything about them that's distinctive? So it's coming forward in the reeds.
So they have, they're small and brown, they're a bit bigger, they'll be bigger than the chiffchaffs. If it is kind enough to show itself, it might have a slightly broad tail, but the view we get of it will probably be so fleeting. It is really quite a featureless
So there
thing.
It is coming out again.
No, and that is it. I think it is. It's flicking its tail. Yeah.
Well, no, if it suddenly calls.
Yeah. Is it? I'm not sure it is.
But it's not the same as those birds behind, which don't look at them because you'll miss this one.
Yeah.
Which are much yellower. This is much more brown. It does have a rounded tail.
Yeah. See, this is the joy of technology. Let's get there. I'm going to fire up my phone.
It seems to have a white vent, or a pale vent. It's brownish all over. The tail almost appears to be two lobes. As it happens, there's a chiffchaff behind it, which is definitely a different colour. Yeah, I think that is it.
But you can see how sort of undistinctive it is.
Yes,
It's got
but
just that brown thing. But you can see the tail, the rounded tail, quite broad tail.
Definitely, definitely saw that as sort of two lobes almost of tail.
It's just gone low again.
What would be good is if it called out.
Wouldn't it be good? Yes, if it actually, while it was
visible,
we could. Dragonflies butting in, they are amazing as well. I don't know if you've found this, but do you have interest in other things of nature as well as birds, or is it just the birds?
It's primarily the birds for me, but you can't help but notice those other things as
you go around. Yeah.
Now, there's 3 birds there that are very similar looking. The one that's out on the post, I think that is the thing that we think is
the Chetty's warbler.
Warbler.
And it's now come onto a reed and it's sitting for about 2 seconds.
Cool.
Yeah, it's not going to do it
no.
though, is it?
But it did look very similar to the picture on the app.
Yeah.
In terms of the brownishness, the roundedness of the tail.
And the cream.
And the cream, yeah.
Particularly the tail.
Well,
should we go and look some ducks?
Absolutely. I think we've earned it. I've seen quite a large variety of birds today anyway.
It's not bad. I mean, it depends. I don't know. Are you a lister? Do you keep lists and go for targets?
No, I don't go for targets.
No.
I'm the sort of birder who, as a casual birder, I'm the sort of birder that will just enjoy any bird that I'm seeing. But I do delight in seeing new species.
Yeah.
But I'm moving more towards trying to keep lists just because of the citizen science aspect of it.
Absolutely, yeah, it's a useful
sharing
thing.
The records.
Do you upload it onto the BTOs?
So I've recently rejoined the BTO and I'm going to do the garden bird watch.
Right.
I've got the eBird app and I have done a couple of records, but I haven't been consistent.
Yeah, me too.
And that's one of my things I would like to start doing.
I think I will probably later on sit down and just try and recall.
Yeah, I was thinking
what
it might
we
be
saw.
quite nice to sort of say on mic what we've seen, and then we can use that as a record.
Yeah, of course. The BTO has a very useful app, Bird Track, I think it's called.
Oh, right.
And again, that is citizen science, and so anybody can. If you see a bird, you just go, "Oh, look, great tit," and you put it up, and it'll ask you where you are. It'll find where you are by GPS. And you can do it as a casual sighting, which would be your kind of thing, or a complete list. So the complete lists tend to be more obviously more useful from the science aspect of things, because you've made an effort to look at everything, but it doesn't mean you've seen everything that was seen there that day. And so I got into the habit of doing that as a result of the 200 bird year, which I've not really repeated since. So I keep lists of individual visits for that reason that you said, the citizen science thing, but rather gone off the whole idea of going for targets. I think it's just
right. Well, because I kind of want to ask you about your book, and I don't, because I want people to go off and read it.
Yes, I want everybody to go off and not just read it, but buy it, and buy it for all their friends and their family. Oh, look, it's Christmas coming up.
Oh yes, it's ideal for that. It's a perfect book. I highly recommend it. So, and very humorous as well. So I don't want to ask you about anything about the 200, or rather...
No spoilers,
exactly,
is what you're trying to say.
Exactly, yes. What's the reason that you don't keep this as often nowadays?
I hesitate to say that it's because I feel like I've done it, but it's. Right. I think for that specific year, it was sort of complex in a way. Partly it was because I didn't want to have my initial enthusiasm just to tail away, which I know from past experience. That's the kind of thing I do. I go, right, I'm going to do this, and then for a month I'll do it, and then then it just fades away. So I generally thought, if I give myself a target in a kind of blokey kind of way, and being a kind of statistics fan, not a freak, but cricket fan, so I like the stats side of things. So if I give myself a target, then I will, it'll keep me on the straight and narrow. And so it proved. And it also, thinking about the kind of book I wanted to write about it, the whole experience, it did give a sort of narrative drive that, hooked people into it. And it did make me go to more and more places as the year went on, and it was just fantastic actually, because it did really made us all as a family go out. So spent more weekends away in that year than we have done before or since.
Are there different parts of the UK that you could recommend for specific types of birds?
Oh, crikey!
Or are there places that you've been in the UK where you've had particular experiences that you can share that aren't spoilers for the book?
Of course not. No, but thinking of this time of year, we went up to Northumberland during half term. We and we stayed in Bamborough on the Northumberland coast and went to all along the coast there and to Lindisfarne, which is a fascinating place to go to anyway, but particularly good for birds. You get this migration season in absolutely full swing, so you'll get, depending on the weather, you'll get falls of birds coming in from the east, and if, as at the moment, this week, there's a system coming in from the Atlantic, so there's anticipated and already happening American birds being blown across. So rarity hunters will be off to the Scilly Isles for this month in particular. Is if that's your thing, then the Scilly Isles are supposed to be. I've never been, but supposed to be fantastic. There's a North
ring-necked parakeet.
Yeah, well, North Norfolk is.
Is it a rose-ringed parakeet?
I know they have different.
Yeah,
depends on which list you subscribe to.
One of the green parrots.
Psittacula crameri.
Yes.
One of the few ones I know, Latin names. Other places. Norfolk is just fantastic. Pretty much at any time of the year, especially the north coast. And again, through the winter, you'll get enormous flocks of waders like knot and dunlin, and their gatherings are quite spectacular. And again, thinking of the autumn and winter coming up, from November onwards, it will be prime starling murmuration season, and there, in particular, the RSPB reserve at Minsmere in Suffolk is fantastic for those. Brighton Pier, if you go to the West Pier, every year there's a really excellent gathering of starlings there.
That's a really good point.
And on the Somerset Levels at RSPB Ham Wall, there is millions.
That is definitely one place I want to go to.
We went into one of the hides to see what birds might be visible, but we continued our chat. We were keeping our voices low, so I've amplified this section. I didn't want you to think we were being noisy. There were some grounds maintenance going on, so apologies for the mechanical noise you can hear.
I can't remember what this hide's now called, but whichever one it is, it's looking at another angle on the grazing marsh of the Wetland Centre. And to the left, you probably can't quite see it, but if you see in the break in the reed beds, there's a wall, and it's got a spur coming out it's a camera coming out. So that is the sand martin wall. So that's where the sand martins will arrive in March, April, and they'll breed there.
Is it a natural wall?
And then they'll go, no, they've built it. They've built it with the holes in it. So the sand martins are usually the first of those hirundines, the swallows, house martins, and they're not relatives but very similar to the swifts. They're the first to arrive. So one of the times I will make sure I come here is in that March, April period to see them swooping in and around.
Gosh, these are great tips for my future visits.
Yes, timing is everything, isn't it? As I discovered, I remember when I was telling a very expert birder about my plan for the year to see the 200, and I was coming at it from a base of dimly remembered things, and I must have had some sort of vague misunderstanding that I'll just kind of go to these places at any time in the year and the bird would miraculously be there. Yes. But it wasn't the case at all, and as I listed these places, and when I was going to them, he just said, well, you're a month late for that one, a month early for that one, and rethink it. And certainly there wasn't much I could do about it, but we were in Edinburgh. I was working in Edinburgh during the festival, so that's August, and we went on the boat trip to Bass Rock with the gannet colony, and of course there were gannets because they're there most of the time, but literally 3 days earlier, all the puffins, thousands of puffins, had scarpered off back into the sea.
Yes.
There was just one, lonely one, sitting on the water.
Unfortunately, the hide had quite noisy floorboards, and there were quite a lot of people walking through.
Were there any birds or bird groups that you found particularly difficult, that were quite challenging for you to identify?
All the little brown ones. I should say ducks. Ducks that aren't males, because the males usually have the flashier kind of plumage, but the females are quite often just sort of different streakings of brown. Still very attractive, but more difficult to sort out. Sorting out all the different waders, the plovers and dunlin and knots, and
yes.
So I'm beginning to get those straighter in my head, and pretty much all varieties of bird. That's not quite true,
no.
But you know what I mean. So you get yourself fooled sometimes, and you think, oh, I know what that is. Oh, I'm really confident about it, and you go out and you just the views you get are so fleeting, and all you'll have is a chip or a chip, and the difference between a chip and a chip.
Yeah, I think that's like one of the things with the gulls. So I've started to think, right, I think I've started to work out some of the gulls now. Obviously the main ones, but things like, if there happens to be a glaucous gull around or a common gull, or I'm still...
Yes, common gulls are surprising because they have similarities to herring gulls, but they're smaller. And they're the same size as black-headed gulls, but they are different looking. And then if you have them with kittiwakes and that kind of thing, which you might do, and again, just the variations of plumage depending on what age they are, and
it's quite daunting. I mean, I think what I'm trying to do is give myself some space to think, okay, look, this is why I say, look, I could be wrong when I say stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I'm learning all the time.
I don't know are good words to embrace, because
yes.
It's allowed not to know, I think. I think from what I haven't seen the glaucous gull, but having read about them, I think if there were one in front of us, you'd know, because it's
very
big.
White.
But also very big.
Oh, right.
It's the biggest gull. So.
Oh, are they bigger than herring gulls?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting to know.
In the same way, I mean, a similar thing, because quite often, apparently in Scotland, in the Highlands, people will go up and say, oh, I've seen an eagle, but they've seen a buzzard.
Yeah.
And so I'm told, again, I didn't manage to see any eagles when I'm up there, but, when you see the difference, you go, oh, I see.
Yes, absolutely.
It's absolutely massive.
I was really lucky to see a golden eagle at quite close range when we were on Mull. We were standing up her hillside, and it flew up from the valley past us.
Oh, fantastic.
And it was the first time I'd actually seen all of the golden feathers on the back of the head, and it was
spectacular.
Beautiful, it really was.
Yeah, no, we didn't spend nearly as much time in Scotland, or haven't, as I'd like. It's on the list for next year. But we did manage a day trip to Skye when the weather was good, but no eagles of any kind.
No.
We're in the Peacock Tower, which is the main hide on the site, which has panoramic views of the whole site, so you can walk around this and look at pretty much everything. And on the wall there's a blackboard, Warden's Notes, and where people have put, I think it's the same person, but what some of the unusual birds that have been seen here. There's been a peregrine on site yesterday, and 3 snipe, 3 meadow pipits, 3 chiffchaff, which I think we saw, didn't we? A stone chat, which we didn't see, boo, and jack snipe, a skylark. And today we see 10 snipe, so they're obviously coming out into the sun. Same peregrine, 17 grey lag geese, 3 siskins, which was nice, 2 linnets, and very excitingly 2 redwings.
So they're going to be the first winter visitors?
That'll be the autumn migration is well underway, and they'll be coming in their droves in the next couple of weeks, I think, the redwings and those winter thrushes.
What does the S and the W?
That is going to tell you where there's a little key underneath. So GM doesn't mean
grazing marsh,
it's on the grazing marsh, so then there's a map above, so you can see, okay, let's look out there, and that's where it was. And CX8 is Charing Cross Hospital, which is where the peregrine lives.
Right, yes, you mentioned that.
And presumably the S and the W is just south and west, which means that they'll have flown over, I should think, heading in that direction. And they also have in that hide, which we've just come out of, some clipboards and pens so that people can write their own sightings down. And quite often, if a school party's been in, you'll see things like ostrich and chicken and dinosaur, and kids having fun.
Oh, they sound like good days to be here.
Yeah, obviously.
All the rarities turn up. So what kind of birds are you looking out for as the autumn progresses then?
For the big excitement, for my own excitement, definitely the arrival of the winter thrushes will be something, redwings. So it's easy to go, oh no, summer's over and the swifts and swallows have gone, but it's ever changing, isn't it? It's out with those lot and in with the winter ones from.
Pretty amazing how there are those sort of times in the year.
Micro seasons as well, aren't they? So every week is different. Things on the move, and so there should be in the next couple of weeks redwings coming and mooching about in Streatham and Crystal Palace, where I hang out, and field fairs with any luck. Occasionally you'll see one in London, and other winter excitements. I think murmurations of starlings we've already talked about. Will be something to make a special trip for.
Yes, I think that's something that we're going to try and do this autumn.
Yeah, and then again large numbers of wintering wildfowl, so things like widgeon and teal, which will be coming here and congregating in quite large numbers, and the waders as well. So I'm sure we'll at some stage in the winter we'll go off to Norfolk, and I'll expound at great length to my family on the excitements of waders. And
how is your son about birding?
He really enjoys it, and he's
fantastic.
I think he wouldn't at the moment. He's 13, and he'll come out. He'll happily come out with me on an excursion. Not sure about the early rising, I suppose, and that kind of thing. But we've been here on more than one occasion, and he professes to enjoy it, which is good. And I think he particularly likes birds of prey. So anything that is about to kill something will be well received. So I'm hoping that in the next year or so we'll make it up to the west coast of Scotland and Marl maybe, or Skye, and we'll see the eagles.
Do you travel to other countries much?
Haven't much actually. My work doesn't really take me that way, and we go on foreign holidays, but we stay at home quite a lot as well. We did go. We went to Spain last year for a few days, which was Granada, which was pretty memorable. Yes, huge numbers of things like swifts, especially, and some birds that quite a few birds that you wouldn't see in Britain. And we saw a golden oriole, which was a really memorable thing.
Yeah.
And crag martin and short-toed tree creeper and spotless starling and things like that, which you just go. I had to look them up in the guide, and is that really a thing? It really is a thing. I think other things that in the winter. Sort of going back to the winter thing. Last year was a great year for hawfinches. There was a huge eruption. They stayed for ages, and I didn't actually in the end get to see that many of them. But that was again another thing where you go a special excursion to. There's a wood in Surrey where they'd been. But it would be lovely if we had a waxwing year as well. Because aren't they just brilliant?
So I've been lucky enough to see them in the wild in Nova Scotia. They were cedar waxwings, and I think our ones are there's Bohemians, and I think that's the ones that we have. I think it's the same. I'm not sure if it's the same species. I'd have to look at the Latin name or the scientific name. But they are such beautiful birds, and because I've looked at the pictures so much and worked out what the features are, and because I've been lucky enough to see cedar ones in Nova Scotia, when I was in New York recently, I was doing a bird walk through Prospect Park, and two birds flew into a tree above me, my attention was drawn to them straight away. They were hidden by leaves, but as they flew in, I'd seen that they were like a very smooth colour, and I just saw their tails in the tree. And
you see that little little bar of yellow.
And it's like, I've got
That's
them.
fantastic.
I know. Even though I couldn't see them after that, they're gone.
That's what you get.
I knew it.
It's when you notice that there's, that expression, which we shouldn't Google, for birding by jizz, knowing the jizz. It's supposed to be from the general impression of size and shape, and knowing how a bird is, what it feels like to look at.
What
So
the key features are.
seeing that jay just across the water,
Yes.
you just instantly, that's a jay because of just the way it is.
Yes.
And the more you go out, I suppose, the better you get at that. And I know people who've been obviously doing it at a ridiculously knowledgeable level for years, and will half a mile away, back-tailed godwit.
Yeah.
A tiny speck has just landed and gone, just knowing.
Absolutely. But that's
From
part
that instant.
of what I'm encouraging people to do as well, is sort of listen to the birds that they hear around them, because often you might not see them, but you'll hear them. And that can be frustrating if you don't actually see a bird, but you can hear the voice,
Yeah.
a bit like the Chetty's warbler
Yeah.
earlier. If you're totally unfamiliar with them, it's
And that-
really hard to
that
know.
goldfinch that's just twittering away in the
Exactly, yeah,
background.
I think that's what made me start to think about it.
Yeah.
So several years ago we went to Turkey on holiday, and there was a big flock of goldfinches near the hotel, and that was the first time I'd heard a lot of them singing and chatting
Right,
to each other.
yeah.
And it was from then I realised, now, because I heard them every day,
Yeah.
now I know what a goldfinch sounds
Yeah.
like. And now I have them in the garden a lot, so I recognise it. But one can just fly over,
Yeah.
and I'll know
And
it
there
without
it is,
even
yep.
looking. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely, and I'm still terribly bad at it, really, especially just the little chinks and chips and just tiny noises that they make.
Yeah,
And
like
things that have so many different kinds of things. A chaffinch makes about 50 million different noises. Ravens,
Yes.
actually, you mentioned, ravens have a huge range of cronks and sharks and croaks.
they're amazing birds.
And then you get the birds that imitate other ones. Jays do that, don't they?
Yes,
They'll
yes.
imitate something.
Starlings do as well.
And starlings are extraordinary
We
at it.
had,
Yeah.
when we stayed, again in the Outer Hebrides, one year we stayed in a little house on Harris, and there was a starling that would sit on the chimney and call, and we could hear it in the lounge because it came down the fireplace, the sound. But it did chickens, gulls.
Yeah. The
and we
works.
knew it was that because it was all part of the same song, and it even did a little sound that sounded like a little kid's train or something. It was like a bark bark. So where did you get that
The things
from?
it's picked up.
Yeah.
Well, yes, I remember that time we were on Lindisfarne, walking through the village. I heard a curlew calling, and I was in the middle of the village. And I thought, what's the curlew? I know there are curlews in the fields outside. Looked up, and there was a starling on the roof.
That's amazing. And I think starlings are very often overlooked as, people know about the murmurations, but I think as a bird, they're not as frequent as they
absolute
used to be,
crackers,
but-
aren't they? They're
But they're amazing,
fantastic.
especially now they're coming into their
Yeah.
winter plumage, and they're so shiny
Yeah.
and iridescent.
And those tiny little yellow, sort of golden yellow dots. If you look really
they
close,
look like
they have those.
hearts or something,
Yeah.
don't they? Little hearts. But yeah, and amazingly, they have such a wonderful song, or range of sounds that they can make. That's one of the things.
they're a
is
bit
like,
cheeky.
Just don't look, yeah, exactly. They squabble. You get them into a bird bath, and as soon as one decides to have a bath, they've all got to have a bath,
Yeah.
and then suddenly there's no water left.
Yeah, big fan. I think
Yeah.
I think if you're talking about New York, I think they're regarded as a pest there, aren't they? Because they are so numerous, and that's they're introduced, aren't they? So
Yeah, those and house sparrows
yeah,
are invasive, and apparently I've heard reports of house sparrows in America throwing bluebirds out of bluebird
really?
nests. And they don't seem aggressive in this country at all. So
No.
whether it's that they're fighting for, what do you call it? I was going to say accommodation. I don't mean
Territory.
Yes, territory.
accommodation will do fine though. I
Yes,
don't.
yes, it's a des res. I want
Yes.
that. So Lev, it's been so wonderful walking around with you today at the Barnes Wetland Centre. Thank you so much for guiding me round and sharing your experiences with me.
It's been absolutely my pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me. Any excuse to come to this place, especially on a beautiful sunny autumn day, slightly warmer than it probably should be, but we're not going to go there. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks.
And I'll put the details of your book in the show notes, but do you want to just tell me the title again for everyone?
The book is called Why Do Birds Suddenly Disappear, and it is available from all good bookshops.
I thoroughly enjoyed spending the morning with Lev, and send my thanks to Lindsay Fenner for introducing us. Please do check out his book, Why Do Birds Suddenly Disappear? And also check out his website. He has some wonderful blog posts. You can find it at levparikian.wordpress.com, and all links are in the show notes. I'd love to know what birds you've seen this week. Join our Facebook group to discuss this week's episode, or post your photos of the birds you've seen. I really do enjoy hearing your tales, so come and join the conversation there. Find us at facebook.com/groups/Casual Birder Podcast. Follow me on Twitter at Casual Birder Pod, or on Instagram at Casual Birder Podcast. You can email me at casualbirderpod@gmail.com. Make sure you don't miss any episodes by subscribing to the show. Subscribing is free, and you can do it wherever you listen. And if you enjoy the show, please consider posting about it on social media. Personal recommendation is such a valuable way of helping others to find the show. Thank you to Randy Braun for designing the artwork for the show. The theme music is Short Sleeve Shirt by the Drones. Thanks to them for letting me use it. Check out their website at www.dronesmusic.net. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you'll join me again for another episode of the Casual Birder Podcast.